Developing right now on Morning News Now, True Blue. This morning, Democrats celebrating decisive wins in a consequential and historic off-year election. In New York City, Democratic Socialist Zohran Mamdani now set to become the city's youngest mayor in a century. His victory, along with several other key races, signaling a shift to the left in the first major test of President Trump's second term.
New York will remain a city of immigrants, a city built by immigrants, powered by immigrants, and as of tonight, led by an immigrant. So hear me, President Trump, when I say this. To get to any of us, you will have to get through all of us.
All this as the government shutdown drags on into day 36, making it the longest shutdown in the U.S. ever. We are tracking it all, plus election reaction from the White House.
Also this morning, breaking news out of Kentucky. At least 7 people killed after a UPS cargo plane goes down in a fiery crash moments after takeoff. We have a lot to get to on this post-election Wednesday. Good morning. Good to have you with us. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. And let's get right to those big wins for Democrats across the country and the first elections of the second Trump administration.
Yeah, it might be an off-year election in an odd-numbered year, but voters still made their voices heard. The Democratic Party secured wins in key races and measures and now hope to keep the momentum going into next year's midterms. Let's begin right there in New York City. NBC News projects Zohran Mamdani will become the city's next mayor. He soundly defeated former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, who ran as an independent after losing to Mamdani during the primary over the summer. Mamdani, a 34-year-old Democratic Socialist, will become the youngest New York City mayor in a century. The win for Mamdani spotlights his rapid rise in politics since launching his campaign just last year. Across the Hudson River in New Jersey, NBC News projects Democrat Mikey Sherrill will become the state's next governor. She defeated Republican Jack Ciattarelli in a race that was forecast to be tight, but in the end was a rout for Sherrill. Also, history was made in Virginia as Democrat Abigail Spanberger is projected to become the first woman to ever lead the Commonwealth. She came out victorious in her gubernatorial race against Republican Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earl Sears. And in California, voters have overwhelmingly approved a Democratic-drawn congressional map. Governor Gavin Newsom says that Prop 50 sends a powerful message to President Trump. We have plenty of reaction ahead this morning to last night's election results, including from the White House, where President Trump is once again calling for changes to the election system across the country. Let's begin with NBC News correspondent Sam Brock, who's here in studio to help us break down the results. Sam, you were there last night with Zohran Mamdani's celebration in New York. I mean, it really is historic. We know President Trump tried to weigh in at the last minute, endorsing Andrew Cuomo. Of course, Cuomo defeated by Mamdani in the primary. Set the stage. What was the coalition that kind of rallied around Mamdani to help him win? And what was his message to supporters and really to the city of New York last night?
What a scene and a remarkable political phenomenon, guys. You're talking about a 34-year-old Democratic Socialist, he said, and a Muslim. And I am not apologizing for any of this. That so perfectly captures the essence of his campaign. His first remark to supporters last night were this: for so long, the working class has been told the power does not belong in your hands. Well, guess what? Through this election, not only does the power belong in your hands, we just toppled a political dynasty. You're referring to Andrew Cuomo, who was a 3-term governor in New York, right? So the idea that this person who came out of nowhere with a populist message overtook someone who was a household name in New York politics is remarkable in its own right. But he did so around the messaging of affordability and giving people an actual plan, right? He said he's going, and we'll see if it happens, but he promised to be delivering free buses and universal childcare, which for so many families, especially in a city like New York, is exorbitantly expensive. In order to achieve those goals, Mamdani has talked about the idea of raising taxes, and this gets to the Democratic Socialist platform, on millionaires in New York, a 2% tax increase, as well as matching the New Jersey tax rate, the corporate tax rate in New York City. He's going to need help from the legislature to accomplish that. He can't do it unilaterally, but he has promised big plans, and that really has resonated with a lot of folks. I will also say I had a conversation with a young woman last night who said, I'm one of the people, Muslim Americans, that lived in New York City in the shadows of 9/11. When Islamophobia was everywhere, I relate to everything that he said about feeling like an outsider and my identity not being as important as someone else's. So it was, to your original point, a coalition of a lot of different things, Joe, that converged together. But Mamdani's point was, let's think bigger. I'm not going to bow to the altar of caution. That was the phrase that really stuck out to me last night. Here's some of what he said on stage. Take a listen.
Thank you for the opportunity to prove myself worthy of your trust. I will wake each morning with a singular purpose: to make this city better for you than it was the day before. This will be an age where New Yorkers expect from their leaders a bold vision of what we will achieve, rather than a list of excuses for what we are too timid to attempt.
Another significantly striking portion of his speech last night. He said, and now to President Trump, because you're probably listening, turn up the volume. The corruption is going to be rooted out. The billionaires that are evading, taxes and exploiting loopholes, forget about that. That day is over. And by the way, this is a city that was founded by immigrants, fueled by immigrants, and is now led by an immigrant. Of course, there has been so much conversation, guys, about what the federal government is going to do, and President Trump specifically when it comes to immigration raids in New York City, potentially withholding federal funding, whether that's constitutional or not. We'll find out. But this is basically Mamdani's response to Washington and saying we're here and we're not going anywhere.
So many layers there of just how historic the nature is, no matter what. Sam, let's also talk about the two big races for governor. There's New Jersey and Virginia. Walk us through those two Democratic campaigns that won in those states.
These were the first two gubernatorial races since version 2.0 of Trump has been in the Oval Office. So in many ways, it was viewed, guys, as a litmus test for where things stand. I do think the New Jersey race is the most significant one here. A, because President Trump said it was. B, because there were $200 million spent on this race. That is an all-time record. And C, look at the spread on that. Mikey Sherrill, 56% of the vote to 43% for Jack Ciattarelli, who is a Trump-aligned or MAGA-aligned Republican who almost won 4 years ago, with this huge shift of the voting population, and specifically young men and Latino voters, moving to the right. Well, if that's not an endorsement of Cheryl's sort of populist message, she said she was going to freeze electricity rates and soaring costs. I mean, certainly the affordability component came into the New Jersey side of things, but this was seen as a litmus and a possible toss-up, and she won resoundingly. That was remarkable. As far as Abigail Spanberger winning in Virginia as well, the proximity to D.C. is very important. There are so many federal workers right now who are either working without paychecks or who are furloughed. She spoke to that. She spoke to an economic populism, but she also campaigned on abortion rights, and she won significantly by 15-plus percentage points. For Democrats wondering what the tea leaves were showing in a post-Trump second administration era, we found out last night, at least in the early going, that the message of affordability and where Americans are feeling about the economy sort of skew toward the Democratic messaging. We'll see if that sticks.
All right. Sam Brock, a lot to cover. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Well, for more on last night's big night for Democrats, let's bring in Dave Wasserman. He's the senior editor and elections analyst for the Cook Political Report with Amy Walter, and also the man who coined the election night phrase, I've seen enough, before he calls a race. Dave, good morning. Thanks very much for being with us. So, as Sam just pointed out, some of these races were just really not that close. I mean, you look at that spread there on New Jersey governor, for example. How much were last night's results a rebuke of the Trump administrations? What are your big takeaways?
Yeah, these were statement wins for governor. But when I look under the surface, there are also a couple of questions that I had heading into Election Day. Where would Democrats end up in the Virginia House of Delegates? Well, they ended up picking up 13 seats and getting to a 64-36 majority. And the reason that's significant is Democrats won every single seat that was won by Trump by 4.5 points or less, or that Trump had lost in 2024. If you were to superimpose that on the U.S. House, Democrats would be on track for a narrow majority, even despite the gerrymandering push that the White House has embarked on. Keep in mind that Proposition 50 in California passed, which allows Democrats to counter what Republicans did in Texas and kind of reduce the Republican redistricting advantage heading into 2026. And then the second question I had was related to Hispanic voters. Would we see a snapback from their big swing to Trump in 2024? And in both Virginia and New Jersey, we saw that. Take, for example, the most Hispanic locality in Virginia, Manassas Park, outside D.C. That's a place that voted for Kamala Harris by 20 points in 2024. It voted for Abigail Spanberger by 42 points yesterday. That was the biggest single swing of any locality in the state. Hudson County, New Jersey, a place where Kamala Harris only won by 28 points. Mikey Sherrill won it by 49, which snaps back to a typical Democratic margin. It shows that these voters on inflation or immigration and ICE were snapping back to their Democratic roots. Or Passaic County, New Jersey, which went from a 3-point Trump win in 2024 to a 15-point Sherrill win.
Yeah, NBC News polls, exit polls yesterday showing nearly 70% of Latino voters in both Virginia and New Jersey voting for the Democrat in those races. Let's talk about here in New York City. Mamdani's big win against Cuomo in the race for New York City mayor. The Democratic Socialists, as we just discussed, energized progressives across the city. But even beyond that, he also generated backlash from the White House. So walk us through Mamdani's win here and what we can expect from City Hall starting January 1st.
Well, first of all, it shows that the president doesn't carry all that much political weight in New York City, or if he does, it's in a negative direction. Zohran Mamdani won a majority of the vote despite late attempts to consolidate the opposition behind Andrew Cuomo. Now, Zohran Mamdani also made lofty campaign promises that will be difficult to enact on day 1 or even day 100 of his mayoral administration. So I expect to see a lot of confrontation. I expect the White House to elevate Mamdani as the face of the Democratic Party to try to rally Republican turnout heading into 2026 beyond what we saw yesterday.
Dave, let's talk California now. NBC News projecting that Prop 50 ballot initiative, as we mentioned, it'll redraw congressional districts to favor Democrats. That was overwhelmingly approved by voters. What should we know about this win for the party, what it ultimately means for control of Congress as we see measures like this taken up across the country?
Well, this was a huge push by Democrats, and it paid off with the initiative winning by 28 points. There wasn't meaningful Republican spending towards the end. It is a necessary prerequisite for Democrats to have a chance to offset what Republicans are doing elsewhere in these gerrymandering wars. And it allows Democrats to pick up between 3 and 5 seats. The delegation could go from 43-9 in Democrats' favor to 48-4. Only 4 federal office holders for on the Republican side for the entire state of California. Now, keep in mind, Republicans have more opportunities to gerrymander elsewhere outside of California and Texas than Democrats do. They have already redrawn Missouri and North Carolina. They're also looking at Indiana and possibly Florida. But Virginia Democrats have opened up a new front in these redistricting wars with what happened yesterday, particularly sweeping the statewide offices, including Attorney General. And if Democrats send the issue to voters in Virginia in the spring, it could allow them to purge 2 to 3 Republican seats from that state. This is a game of inches in the House, getting to 218 seats in 2026. Right now, Democrats might be considered the very slight favorites, but it's going to come down to every single seat, which is why both parties are clawing for every advantage they can get.
All right, Dave Wasserman, we appreciate your time this morning. Thanks so much.
At the White House, President Trump is calling for changes to the election system after Democrats swept the top races in the first major election of his second term. In a post to Truth Social, the president called on Congress to, quote, pass voter reform, voter ID, and no mail-in ballots.
He also claimed without evidence that there was voter fraud surrounding California's Prop 50 ballot measure, which, as we just mentioned, is that effort to redraw the state's congressional maps along party lines. That was done in response to similar efforts by Republicans in Texas.
NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba joins us from Washington with more on the president's response. Monica, good morning. So President Trump was busy on Truth Social yesterday. He made these unsubstantiated claims of voter fraud for years, most notably after he lost the 2020 election. But he also used his social media platform to rail against certain voters. So tell us more about that and just some of the response to these posts.
Yeah, and I think these posts really were an indication of where the president's mind was at. A lot of these were actually pre-buttals before polls had even closed, sort of trying to prepare Republicans for perhaps what these results were ultimately going to be, which, of course, was a big night for the Democrats. But specifically, the president has been going after now the mayor-elect of New York City, Zohran Mamdani, repeatedly. And he put this in the context of any, he said, quote, Jewish person that votes for him because he is alleging he is a, quote, self-professed Jew hater is, quote, a stupid person. Of course, that was met with some criticism, certainly from people saying that that is anti-Semitic and claiming that that went too far. And this is something that the president has seized on, has called him also a communist, which he says he is not. He's a democratic socialist. But this is a clear battle that you are likely going to continue to see with the White House continuing to take aim at Mayor-elect Mamdani because, of course, for the president, it's personal as well. And in New York, he has already threatened, he says, to withhold federal funding from the city and the state in response to this. But you guys also mentioned these issues of the claims of widespread voter fraud for which there is absolutely no evidence. That's something the president continues to talk about. But also he's trying to say that Republicans should abolish the filibuster. But there is absolutely no appetite on Capitol Hill among Republican leadership to actually do that. So I think you were seeing a president continuing to air some grievances there. And you saw Republicans try to put a lot of distance between the president and some of these losses for Republicans in states that Republicans continue to point out are left-leaning states, guys.
So, Monica, clearly last night did not go the president's way. When we've seen something like that happen in the past, previous administrations, previous presidents have sort of then, made efforts to get out on the road, get their message to the American people. Is there anything on the horizon like that for President Trump at this point?
I think there are discussions in the White House about certainly seizing on some of the messaging they want to amplify. And one way that they're going to do that today is they're going to try to frame this as 1 year ago, President Trump really received they will argue, this massive mandate with his election victory. And they're going to try to highlight what they view as their greatest accomplishments of the last 10 months or so in office. And so the president's going to be traveling to Miami today for a speech in which I think you will see him try to talk about some of those things and look to the future. But your question about travel and campaigning, certainly Donald Trump didn't do any of that for this off-year election. But I think once we start to talk about the midterm elections, that plan will probably look a little bit different. And he will be getting out there in the coming months. Though this is a president who has traveled almost as much overseas and to other countries than he has to states so far in this first year in his second term.
Monica, while we have you, I want to get to some other news from Washington. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said U.S. forces carried out yet another strike on a vessel in the Eastern Pacific. It's the 16th strike on a suspected drug boat since President Trump took office. What more are we learning here?
Yeah, the defense secretary said that 2 people were killed. Again, this is an argument the Trump administration has made. They allege that these are narco traffickants who are moving, they say, again, alleged drugs from that area into the United States, and that's why they've been arguing they need to continue to take them out. But lawmakers are really clamoring for more information. They want to know more about the intelligence that's leading to these decisions and why the president feels he has the authority to continue to carry out and order these strikes. And so today, Secretary of State Marco Rubio actually will be briefing some key lawmakers on that, which is something they have been asking for more transparency on. Joe and Savannah.
Monica Alba. Monica, thank you so much. This morning, the key policy behind the Trump administration's economic agenda faces a major test before the Supreme Court. It's yet another legal battle over the limits of presidential authority.
This time, the court is set to hear oral arguments in a high-stakes case on whether President Trump has the legal right to impose these sweeping tariffs on international imports, as we've seen him do this year. You'll remember what President Trump called Liberation Day back in April. He announced tariffs ranging from 10 to 50% on imports from more than 100 trading partners around the world. Well, now the president is appealing a decision in the lower courts that ruled that his tariffs were an illegal overreach because they were enacted using a law designed for use during a national emergency.
For more on this, let's bring in NBC News senior Supreme Court reporter Lawrence Hurley. Lawrence, good to have you with us. So President Trump is making it explicitly clear how important this case is to him. He posted on Truth Social last night saying the case is, quote, literally life or death for our country. He even suggested he would go in person to today's oral arguments. That would make him the first president to do that. Why is this case so crucial to his agenda? Break it down for us here.
Well, the first thing to remember is that President Trump just really loves tariffs, and this is something that even predates his presidency. He thinks that the U.S. has been kind of badly treated by other countries, and that's why we need to have tariffs on goods coming in from overseas. And it kind of suits his sort of wheeler-dealer style of presidency, where he can kind of impose these tariffs on different goods and countries, and then he can lift them, and he can have exemptions for certain companies and certain goods, and people come to him and lobby for this. So he's clearly just loves it, the idea. And it's also important, if you remember when Congress passed his big, beautiful bill earlier this year, they claimed partly that it would be revenue neutral because of the money that was coming in from the tariffs. So if they lose that tariff revenue, that would lead to other problems with balancing the books on the big, beautiful bill.
So, Lawrence, to try to make this, say this as non-wonky as possible, the issue really here, the big question, it's around a law. It's from 1977, and it's called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. And that basically allows the president to regulate imports when there is an emergency. But before President Trump began his second term, no president had ever used a law in this way to impose tariffs. Walk us through, legally, what the court will be ruling on and what the outcome could be for all those tariffs.
So I'll try not to be too wonky, but, it is the Supreme Court.
You're doing a great job.
So one key issue here is the Supreme Court's conservative majority is often very skeptical of any president trying to use a law that hasn't been used for a purpose like, a broad economic or social purpose before, that doesn't explicitly say that you can do this, right? And so this law, that actually doesn't even mention tariffs, right? So some of the justices might look at this and say, well, where does it say tariffs? And that might be the end of the case. But you also think of when President Joe Biden was president, the court repeatedly struck down Biden policies that sought to do these kind of broad policies through old laws, including his effort to end do student loan debt relief. And the court said then that, they basically embraced this doctrine called the major questions doctrine that said the president can't do this unless Congress specifically says he can. So that could also be a play in this case.
Lawrence, we know this isn't the first time the Supreme Court has faced a hotly disputed case involving the president's authority under this administration. And the 6-3 conservative majority has repeatedly backed the president. But those have been on sort of a temporary basis while other legislation plays out. Are the conservative justices, does it seem like they could be at a crossroads here if they set a precedent in past rulings that could become a factor in this case?
Yeah, I mean, definitely this case is a huge test for the court, right? What is the court going to push back on President Trump's broad assertions of executive power? It hasn't done that so far in these interim cases that you mentioned. A lot of those were on these kind of core issues of presidential power, such as his ability to reorganize the federal government or do immigration issues. So this case is a little different in that sense. It's also so broad for the economy. So I think even a lot of legal experts who were kind of broadly supportive of what the court's done in the other cases think this case is more of a toss-up, and it could set the tone, really for the rest of the administration when it comes to some of these other big policies they might want to do.
Lawrence, real quick, when do you think we get an answer on this one?
Yeah, so normally the court takes months to decide a case, but they did agree to hear this on an expedited basis. So I think, once we have the arguments, we could get a ruling pretty quickly. Kind of depends, obviously, on how in agreement the justices are and how much wrangling there is behind the scenes.
All right. Lawrence, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Well, let's stay in Washington. The government shutdown, it's hitting a new milestone. Now it's 36 days, so that means it is the longest on record. And that comes after a vote to temporarily fund the government failed for the 14th time in the Senate yesterday.
Despite this impasse, there is growing talk among some lawmakers on Capitol Hill that a deal to end the shutdown could be on the horizon.
NBC News Washington correspondent Alice Barr joins us now. So, Alice, that kind of started yesterday. Are we seeing maybe some hope? Is there a little bit of thawing here? Now that these elections are out of the way, especially, does it seem likely that a deal could be in the works? Yes, Vanna and Joe, that does seem to be potentially the case. Some senators are suggesting Democrats may take their election wins as an off-ramp to end what is now the longest ever government shutdown as soon as tomorrow or Friday. Republican Senator Markwayne Mullin of Oklahoma said he's been talking to rank-and-file Democrats who were ready to vote to reopen the government last week, but Mullin said that Minority Leader Chuck Schumer had urged them not to cast those votes until after the elections to avoid losing support and driving down turnout among the liberal base that wants to see the party hold the line. A couple other Republican senators, Mike Rounds, Eric Schmidt, had taken similar takes, saying this was all about the elections. Chuck Schumer's office had no immediate comment, but other Democrats are dismissing those arguments. Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, for instance, calling it, quote, cynical galaxy brain thinking. Regardless, it does seem clear that discussions, at least among rank and file members, are ramping up, and that is a shift that's offering some hope we could be getting closer to the end.
So until this deal comes, we are certainly seeing plenty of disruption around the country, especially at airports. I flew yesterday. I was at Memphis. Our plane was there, but we were told point blank we were taking off an hour and a half late because of the air traffic controller shortage at LaGuardia. And when I did land, it was after 11 p.m. I saw 15 flights at LaGuardia still delayed. Jeez. They hadn't taken off yet. Many of them weren't going to take off. Some angry passengers there. So yesterday, the Transportation Secretary, Sean Duffy, warned what might happen if this stretches on into next week. What's he saying?
Yeah, Joe, condolences to you and all those who have to be in the air right now. Yeah, we've been seeing warning lights blinking from the nation's airports for some time now, but the Transportation Secretary sharply escalated those warnings, saying that the system is reaching something of a breaking point as air traffic controllers are under worsening strain, still working without pay. Listen to him.
If you bring us to a week from today, Democrats, you will see mass chaos. You will see mass flight delays. You'll see mass cancellations, and you may see us close certain parts of the airspace because we just cannot manage it because we don't have the air traffic controllers.
And that's just one way that the shutdown is, having real world impacts. But it is one that, many of us, Joe, among us, can attest to, that it touches people all over the country and it reminds them we are in a government shutdown and it matters.
Alice, one of the other things just like that that's impacting so many Americans is this uncertainty for millions who rely on federal food assistance. We had this recent court ruling that said the administration had to continue funding the food assistance program. But President Trump said on social media yesterday that that program, those SNAP benefits, as they're called, will only be given when the Democrats open up the government. So what is going on here? Is the administration complying with the orders? Is this still being funded?
They are, according to White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, who said the administration is getting payments out the door as quickly as possible. She said the president's post was referring to future SNAP payments. But we know the system is backed up. Only partial payments are going to be coming out, and they are on a delay. The administration saying it had to wait for legal guidance, as Democrats are arguing the money was clearly there to release the full amounts all along, and that really became part of the election messaging that we saw yesterday as well, guys.
All right, Alice, thank you so much. Let's get you some weather now. Heavy rain continues to soak the Northwest with no sign of letting up anytime soon. Let's get a check with your Morning News Now forecast.
Meteorologist Angie Lassman joins us. Angie, good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning. We've got, of course, that really active pattern that's kind of been setting up over the past couple of days for folks across the Pacific Northwest. And we've also got a clipper system that we're watching kind of quickly move across parts of the Midwest and then eventually into the Northeast. But let's start out west. You can see all of that heavy rain. We've got an atmospheric river developing, in some spots really stretching from California up the coast are looking at an extreme level of that. So that means that additional heavy rain. We've also got some really strong winds, not just for folks across the east, but for the west as well. Notice those alerts there include Medford, San Francisco, and they're totaling up to 11 million people. Wind gusts there 30, 40, 50 miles per hour. And of course, as you go higher into those elevations, you'll see those higher numbers too. Meanwhile, for the east, we've got 46 million people. It's across the Northeast, Buffalo to Burlington, down through New York, Boston included in there, as well as Cleveland, where some of these wind advisories, these high wind watches and high wind warnings are in effect as we gear up for another kind of gusty day as this system quickly moves across parts of the Great Lakes this morning. That's where the rain will be centered for the first half of the day, although you can see some of this higher elevation snow kind of working across parts of the Northeast. And then notice that rain gets into New York, New England this afternoon. We'll see the potential for a couple of these stronger storms to develop as well, potentially becoming severe for a few of those. So heads heads up there, but needing the umbrella, needing a little extra time for that evening commute tonight. And then that system, as quick as it moved in, moves out. Now, the one thing that will be left over here as we get into tonight are some really strong winds. Those are going to actually ramp up behind the system across the Northeast, and we'll still be looking at some additional snowfall across parts of those of the Northeast where we've got those higher elevations. So heads up there. A much different story if you look down to the south, where it's there's no snow in sight. It's actually feeling like summer in some spots. Houston, 81 degrees today. Shreveport at 80. We've got the 70s for St. Louis, guys. Upper 60s for even Philadelphia today. That warmth stays centered across the middle of the country here as we get into tomorrow, too. And then we'll kind of start to see the northern tier settling into some more typical temperatures.
Looks nice there in most of the country.
Joe is about to book a flight. Or
I was just there, and it was nice, I have to admit. So great. Good for them.
Except for that airport.
Thanks, Angie.
Thank
Much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, a tech takeover causing worry on Wall Street. Why experts say AI companies' growing influence on the economy could end up costing Americans dearly.
Up first, though, breaking news. Tragedy upon takeoff. We will take you to Kentucky, where several people are dead after a fiery cargo plane crash. Stay with us. Welcome back. This morning, crews have put out the flames from a massive explosion caused by a plane crash at Muhammad Ali International Airport in Louisville, Kentucky. We do want to warn you, the videos we're about to show you are upsetting. Officials say at least 7 people are dead and nearly a dozen are hurt after a UPS cargo plane crashed during takeoff.
Video shows the plane taking off with its left engine apparently on fire. Then the moment of impact as it explodes in a massive fireball. This happened around 5 p.m. Eastern time yesterday. NBC News correspondent Adrian Broadus joins us now from Louisville with the latest. Adrian, good morning.
Good morning to you. As you guys can imagine, this is painful news for so many people across the country, especially the friends and family of the 7 people who were killed. Governor Beshear says at least 11 people were injured. And this terrifying moment was captured on some of the video you're about to see.
This morning, devastating video showing the moment a plane crashed in Louisville.
So there was a huge explosion, believed to be a plane crash, huge fire and smoke. Arson aid is responding as well.
Video showing the UPS cargo plane smoking. It crashed shortly after takeoff, creating a massive fireball, spreading to several businesses on the ground. The flight, on its way to Honolulu, took off from Muhammad Ali Airport, carrying about 38,000 gallons of jet fuel. Officials confirming 7 people were killed, including all 3 crew members on board. Authorities ordering a shelter in place on Tuesday for a 5-mile radius around the crash site. As thick plumes of black smoke spread across the sky, fire crews battled flames for hours, trying to contain the blaze. It consumed several businesses on the ground. UPS, which has a major hub in Louisville, releasing a statement overnight extending its, quote, heartfelt thoughts to everyone involved, adding it's working with the NTSB investigation and is in close contact with the FAA. Sean Garber owns a recycling business near the airport.
The manager saw the ball of fire coming towards him, and he tackled our general manager. And when they stood up, there was literally fire and flames around them.
Now, with the preliminary investigation underway, a community hurting and ready to help.
Tough day for Kentucky. We've always banded together. We will again.
A tough day indeed, but we saw that help on display. Governor Beshear also saying across the region, more than 200 first responders showed up, including at least 100 firefighters. Now, as the sun rises today, members of the investigative team will be able to get a closer look at some of the devastation. The NTSB is leading this investigation. They're sending a team. They're expected to be on the ground later today. But keep in mind, because the government is still shut down, members of that team will not receive pay. In the last hour, we did learn that the airport has opened 1 runway, but still, this is an investigation that's going to take a lot of time and a lot of reshuffling after the airport shut down yesterday, canceling many flights, guys.
All right, Adrian, thank you.
Coming up, we've got continuing coverage on this post-election morning. Ballots still being counted in a number of races, but the results are already clear.
We're going to bring you the latest as Democrats celebrate some key wins. You're watching Morning News Now.
We are back now with more on our top story this morning, the first election results of the second Trump administration.
Democrats came out on top in key races across the country that some see as a rebuke to President Trump. Here in New York City, Democrat Zohran Mamdani is set to become the youngest mayor in the city in a century. NBC News projects the 34-year-old Democratic Socialist has defeated Andrew Cuomo, who ran as an independent after losing to Mamdani in the primary. NBC News also projects New Jersey Congresswoman Mikey Shera will become the state's next governor. She defeated Jack Ciattarelli in a race that was projected to be a lot closer. History has been made in Virginia as Democrat Abigail Spanberger is projected to become the first woman governor ever to lead the Commonwealth. She came out on top in her race against Republican Winsome Earl Sears. In California, voters have overwhelmingly approved a new Democratic-drawn congressional map. Governor Gavin Newsom reacted to those results last night.
We're proud of the work that the people of the state of California did tonight to send a powerful message to an historic president. Donald Trump is an historic president. He is the most historically unpopular president in modern history. In every critical category, Donald Trump is underwater.
This yes vote means California would use the new maps starting next year until a commission officially redraws the maps following the 2030 census. Time now for our weekly medical checkup. This week we're taking a look at a study on how too much light while you sleep could affect your heart.
Plus, new research on how getting your daily steps in could help older people at risk of dementia.
Here to break down these health headlines is NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel. Dr. Patel, good to have you with us. So let's start with this research from the American Heart Association finding nighttime light exposure may hurt your heart health. So explain why this is and what you can do if you live in an area that has a lot of light pollution.
Yeah, good morning, Joe and Savannah. I'm going to also try to explain what kind of studies these are so we better understand how to interpret the research. This was an observational study over 400 adults that they looked at over time, and they used satellites to see how much nighttime light exposure there were in their neighborhoods where they lived, as well as kind of assessments of individual light, what you might do at night. What they found was really not that revealing in that nighttime light can actually harm our heart. That's not something new. What they did find that was interesting is why. It's a link to basically your brain interpreting that light exposure as stressors, almost as significant as a stress as an injury to your body. That leads to cardiac stress, that triggers an immune response, and that really does, unfortunately, lead to larger and higher incidences of cardiac events. 17% of this group saw a cardiac event at the end of this period. Again, it's observational. We don't know if that was a causal link, but we do know that nighttime light exposure is bad. So here are the doctor's orders. Try to keep your nighttime area as dark as possible. This includes the three of us, guys. I know we're on screens at night. Put the screens away. Even if you're checking your phone for that last-minute news flash, put them away. Not NBC, but put it away. And then avoid screens before bed. And then in your neighborhoods, this is a call to policymakers. We've got an election that just came in. This should be one of the things that in the many things that governors and mayors do is to think about light exposure at night for neighborhoods.
That's a really good point. Okay, let's talk intermittent fasting. This has gotten super popular in recent years, and there's been back and forth, though, right? Sometimes I hear it's good, sometimes I hear it's bad, but we've got some new research looking at how it affects our thinking abilities. What can you tell us?
All right, this type of research is what's called a meta-analysis. It's what we call the study of studies. They basically took 71 studies that looked at about over 3,400 adults who had some period of fasting. I want to just caveat, a lot of what we see on social or some of the literature around intermittent fasting is a much longer period of fasting, 16 hours, 24 hours. This was a period on average of about 12 hours. So a lot of us probably fall into this category. And we've all heard that you're not you when you're hungry. This study of studies tried to look at that. And what they found is that there's really not a big deal in skipping a meal or going about 12 hours without a meal on your mental awareness. And then over about 12 hours, what we can see sometimes are some stressors. We think that's your brain triggering your body to intervene. But overall, here are the doctor's orders here. Listen to your body. Discuss this with a health professional, doctor, dietitian, or somebody who knows a lot more about the effects on your heart.
One more here we got. We like to talk about walking alive. We've got a new study here that says a little bit of walking every day may delay memory decline, thinking decline in older adults who are at risk of Alzheimer's. So how much walking are we talking about here?
Right. I think this is everybody wants to know. All right. So long study that looked at sophisticated scans of the brains and studies of older adults. Average age was 72. These are people who did not have any cognitive impairment, followed them over an average of almost 10 years. Bottom line, what they found is that those who were sedentary actually had potential cognitive decline. We've known this for a long time. But the reverse, when people walked anywhere from 1,500 to 3,000 steps, or even as high as 5,000 steps, or even 7,500 steps, you could see a reduction of that cognitive decline or a deceleration by about 7 years. So when people ask me how much walking is enough, just start walking if you haven't been. And then if you can, and you can hit those goals, 5,000, 10,000, that's all the better, and it can help your brain. And so the doctor's orders here, start small. Like I said, just start a habit and then stay active and keep that habit up. Use our phones, use these devices to help us keep track of our steps.
I like that. How much walking is enough? Like, just go.
Yeah, just go.
Go.
Get out.
Get it going.
Thanks, Dr. Patel. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Coming up, a new warning from economists about the real consequences of artificial intelligence, with the companies developing AI technology now making up around 1/3 of the value of the entire stock market.
Our friend Caleb Silver is here to explain what that means and how it could affect you. Stay with us. Morning News Now. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We've got news to warnings about the growth of artificial intelligence, right? Whether it's AI threatening jobs or spreading misinformation. Well, now some economists are sounding the alarm about the technology's increasing dominance in the U.S. economy.
So here's the deal. AI-focused companies now account for nearly 1/3 of the entire value of the U.S. stock market. It's because the 7 biggest tech giants, including chipmaker NVIDIA, are all heavily involved with the technology. That has some experts warning that if the tech doesn't live up to the hype, well, then the economic consequences could be catastrophic.
Here to help explain what that means for the economy and for all of our own savings, 401ks, etc., is our resident expert, Caleb Silver. He's the editor-in-chief of Investopedia and chief business officer at People Inc. And our friend Caleb, good morning. Great to see you. Okay, so if it wasn't already clear that investments into AI just generally are booming, I think one of the biggest indicators of this, and maybe a headline a lot of people have heard about, is NVIDIA, the fact that it became the world's first $5 trillion company just last week. Walk us through how this boom came to be.
Yeah, well, roll it all the way back to November of 2022. That was the commercial release of ChatGPT. When that happened, the stock market went on a tear. The stock market, the NASDAQ, up 75 to 80% since then. Why? Because so many of these companies now are spending on what they call compute power. Compute power, the ability to process information, especially with AI in data centers. And NVIDIA is front and center in all of that. It sells the chips for AI data centers. It sells the chips for AI processing. So a lot of this money is going to NVIDIA and other chip makers, being spent by the biggest companies you just mentioned, Microsoft, Alphabet, Amazon, et cetera. It's a zero-sum game. They are trying to control the AI ecosystem, and they spent some $350 billion just this year on building out data centers, super servers, and using AI to do it all.
So it's important to note, obviously, the stock market, the economy, they're not the same thing, but they can influence one another. So talk about what are some of the concerns people have right now about this AI-heavy focus.
Yeah, when you look at the stock market alone, we look at indicators of a bubble. What makes it look like it's a bubble and might pop? There's 3 indicators. Price to sales. How are these stocks priced based on their sales? And they're at all-time highs in terms of that metric. Price to profits, all-time highs. Price to 10-year profits. All the traditional metrics for looking at companies and saying, well, you're way overvalued right now, your price too high, are in effect. That said, the money is real that's being spent among these companies, except it's being spent among these companies.
How will we be able to sort of decipher, is this a boom or a bubble?
Yeah, well, the stock market could sell off a little bit. The stock market's near all-time highs. It's up some 18% this year. And now you're hearing from the CEOs of Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley that we could be in for a little correction, perhaps a bit more. That's a fall of 10% in the stock market from recent highs. We get one of those or two every single year, so that wouldn't be out of the ordinary. But if you start to see these stocks selling off day after day after day, and we get declines of 20, 25%, then we're in a bear market. But I don't think that's going to happen because investors love these stocks. Investopedia's readers, these are the top 10 stocks, 7 stocks that they own. most of the country, most of investors own these stocks too.
So if you're not a tech executive right now, you're like us sitting here kind of wondering what we should be doing right now. What's the best advice?
Yeah, well, you've done well if you've been invested in just the stock market or just the NASDAQ, which contains a lot of these tech stocks. And I wouldn't stop doing that. If there's a decline in prices, a big 10% correction, well, that just means these stocks have gone on sale. But stay the course. It could get bumpy, but this is where the new economy is heading.
Caleb, thank you as always.
Got some more money news this morning. IBM shaking up its workforce, slashing jobs as it bets big on software growth.
NBC's Emily Lorsch joins us with that and other Wall Street headlines for our Money Minute. Hey, Emily.
Good morning, Joe and Savannah. IBM is trimming thousands of jobs this quarter as it shifts more heavily into high-growth businesses, software, and AI. The company saying the cuts will affect a, quote, low single-digit percentage of its global workforce and that U.S. employment should hold steady. IBM shares have climbed this year thanks in large part to the company's shift in focus. And a safety alert for Jeep owners. Chrysler is recalling more than 320,000 plug-in hybrid vehicles because of a battery defect that could catch fire. There have been nearly 24 reports and one injury potentially related to the issue. The recall affects Wrangler models and Grand Cherokees. Owners are urged to park outside and not charge their cars until a fix is ready. And Pinterest shares are down nearly 20% pre-market after the company's third quarter results came in below expectations. The social media and shopping site expects up to $1.3 billion in sales, slightly under what Wall Street predicted, raising concerns about ad growth heading into the busy shopping season. Tariffs on home furnishings could also weigh on results. Joe and Savannah?
Right. All those kitchen cabinets we keep talking about getting hit specifically. Emily, thank you. Well, coming up on Morning News Now, if you need a little motivation to hit the gym this morning, this is for you.
I think I unlocked something. Never in a million years did I think I would do this.
Up next, we're going to introduce you to one woman who's breaking records in powerlifting well into her 60s. Stay with us.
Welcome back. We end this hour with a 65-year-old woman in Minneapolis who's breaking records in an unexpected sport.
She even got to represent Team USA at an international competition. My good friend and reporter Boyd Hoopert from our NBC affiliate KARE 11 in Minneapolis spoke to her about why she started her athletic journey.
As children, do we really know what's inside us? Not the bones and the veins and the brain, but the motor that drives us.
I grew up in Highland Park.
Even looking back,
There's 7 kids in my family.
Kathy Castro,
Yeah, we had a big family.
remembers
Nothing. Nothing.
nothing
Nothing.
inside her that foretold what was to come. Not as she married and raised 3 kids. Not as she worked as a mental health nurse, pushing 60.
It was after my marriage ended, and I was pretty lost. The boys had already left home, and when my daughter went off to college, I didn't know what I was going to do with myself.
Didn't know what she had inside until the day Kathy went inside these doors.
We're at Los Campeones Gym on Blaisdell.
Trainer Tyler Caldwell remembers the day 6 years ago.
All right.
When Kathy first laced up.
Oh, last hole on the belt. Okay, you better go eat.
Now weighing in at 120 pounds.
These are 45, so this bar will be loaded with 135 here. When she started, she couldn't even pick this weight up.
Nope. I couldn't even squat the bar.
If I would have said grab that weight, she would have looked at me and just laughed.
No one is laughing
Start.
anymore.
Right, good. Kathy's 100 times stronger than she was 10 years ago. And not a lot of 65-year-olds can say that.
Nor can many 65-year-olds say
Stay tall.
their relentless training has earned them multiple Minnesota powerlifting records.
Strongest deadlifter in the state for her age and weight.
Kathy joined a gym to lose a little weight,
Kathy's very inspiring.
only to become
It's unheard of.
a big deal.
Kind of cool.
When Kathy earned the right to represent her country just this month in South Africa.
There we go. Take your time.
At the Powerlifting World Championships. where she squatted more than 170 pounds.
It's remarkable. It really is.
Then, for good measure, another 237 pounds deadlifted by 65-year-old, 120 pounds, Kathy.
I think I unlocked something. Never in a million years did I think I would do this.
That's something Kathy found inside.
USA's Kathy Casper
Propelled her to the silver medal position at Worlds.
I think she's got more in the tank. Yeah, she's just getting warmed up. I honestly think she's going to be stronger at 70 than 65.
Whatever's in there, still hiding. Rest assured, Kathy Casper's still.
We love you!
Finding.
It's never too late.
I love, she's just getting warmed up. Watch out.
Amazing.
70s, 80s. Our thanks to Boyd Hoopert from our Minneapolis affiliate, Carol Evan, for sharing Kathy's incredible story with us. That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
Stay with us, though. The news continues right now. Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us on this busy news day. I'm Savannah Sellers.
And I'm Joe Fryer. Let's get right to the big headline of the morning. The blue wave washing across America. Democrats in several key states coming out on top in some pretty heated head-to-heads. This election day widely seen as the first true political test of President Trump's second stint in the White House. One of those races right here in New York. NBC News projecting 34-year-old Democratic socialist Zohran Mamdani will be the city's next mayor, convincingly beating former Governor Andrew Cuomo, including a roller coaster race that commanded the attention of millions well beyond the 5 boroughs.
My friends, we have toppled a political dynasty. To every New Yorker, whether you voted for me, for one of my opponents, or felt too disappointed by politics to vote at all, I will wake each morning with a singular purpose: to make this city better for you than it was the day before.
Our Steve Kornacki is here with us on set to break down yesterday's big results, plus how Washington is reacting to voters' calls for change at the ballot box.
And a little later, we're digging into the federal investigation that's now underway into what exactly caused this deadly cargo plane crash in Kentucky's largest city.
Let's begin this hour with that resounding night for Democrats as the party swept key races across the country in the first major elections of the second Trump administration.
Yeah, here in New York City, voters have elected the youngest mayor in a century with Zohran Mamdani. NBC News projects the 34-year-old Democratic socialist has come out on top, defeating that main rival, Andrew Cuomo. The former New York governor ran as an independent against Mamdani after losing to him in the primary earlier this year. And then over in New Jersey, big governor's race here, Democratic Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill is projected to become the state's first female governor in more than 2 decades. She defeated Republican Jack Ciattarelli in a race that was expected to have really been a lot closer. And then history's also been made in the state of Virginia. NBC News projects Abigail Spanberger will become the Commonwealth's first female governor. She defeated Republican Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earl Sears. And in California, voters in the Golden State have approved a Democratic-led redrawing of the state's congressional map. Governor Gavin Newsom called it a victory for the state. We're going to have plenty of reaction to last night's results, including our Steve Kornacki over at the big board. But we are going to begin with NBC's Ryan Nobles with a recap of the Democrats' big night. Ryan, good morning.
Good morning. Last night was the first big political test of President Trump's second term, even though the president himself was not on the ballot. And today, Democrats have plenty of reasons to celebrate, with historic victories in Virginia and New Jersey's governor's races and a political shockwave in the election for New York City mayor. Overnight, a Democratic sweep in high-profile elections nationwide. In New York City, Democratic socialist Zohran Mamdani capping a stunning political rise, becoming the first Muslim mayor of the nation's largest city.
Together, we will usher in a generation of change.
The 34-year-old state assemblyman running a grassroots campaign, focusing on rising prices, including proposals like free buses and childcare and city-owned grocery stores. Defeating former Governor Andrew Cuomo, who ran as an independent, and said Mamdani would wreck the city's economy, also focusing on his past criticism of Israel and previous calls for defunding the police, which Mamdani says he no longer supports. President Trump threatening to withhold funds from the city if Mamdani won, and endorsing Cuomo late in the race. Last night, Mamdani addressing him directly.
So Donald Trump, since I know you're watching, I have 4 words for you. Turn the volume up.
The president also a central figure in New Jersey, where Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill becomes the state's first Democratic woman governor, beating Trump-backed Jack Ciattarelli. In a race that was not as close as expected. Sherrill, a former Navy pilot and federal prosecutor, drawing parallels between her opponent and Trump throughout the race.
With this vote, you guys just scream from the rooftops.
In Virginia, Democrat and former CIA officer Abigail Spanberger making history as the state's first woman to be elected governor. Spanberger focusing on the economy while promising to stand up to President Trump's moves to slash the federal workforce.
In 2025, Virginia chose pragmatism over partisanship.
President Trump trying to distance himself from the election results, posting overnight Trump wasn't on the ballot and shutdown were the 2 reasons that Republicans lost elections tonight, according to pollsters. And while last night's results provide Democrats momentum heading into the 2026 midterms, no race last night will have as big an impact as the vote in California. That is where voters overwhelmingly approved a plan for mid-decade redistricting, which could net Democrats as many as 5 seats in next year's election. The move a direct result of President Trump's push to get red states to redraw their districts with the goal of winning more GOP seats.
All right, Ryan, thank you.
Let's get some perspective on last night's results from NBC News chief data analyst Steve Kornacki, who's got the numbers at his trusty big board. Steve, good morning. So do your thing. Take us through the big 3 races and what you saw in the numbers.
Yeah, so a couple of things here. I mean, let's start in Virginia now. Going into last night, Abigail Spanberger, the Democrat, certainly was the favorite. She was favored to win this comfortably. This is probably even a little bit better than most were expecting. But what really powered Spanberger here to that 15-point margin? A big part of it was right here in Northern Virginia, right outside Washington, D.C. You mentioned you had Trump there talking about the shutdown. You're talking about places here with lots of federal employees, folks who know federal employees, where the federal government itself is sort of intertwined with the economy. So was there a shutdown effect, for instance, in a place like this, Loudoun County here, a big suburban county outside D.C.? Here's Spanberger winning it by nearly 30 points. This has been a Democratic county for a while, but last year it was only 16 points for Harris over Trump. So essentially almost doubling the margin here is what Spanberger did. And we saw this throughout Northern Virginia. So I think it took what was already looking to be likely a pretty comfortable Democratic win going into the night. Performing that well in those densely populated places really drove up the number there for Spanberger. Now let's move up to New Jersey. This was the surprise in the sense that Republicans thought this was a competitive race. And not just Republicans, Democrats. I mean, I was talking to Democrats during Election Day yesterday who thought there was a chance they could lose this race. Instead, Mikey Sherrill doesn't just win. The Democrat wins this by 13 points. So what happened here? There were 2 things going on here that really hurt Ciattarelli and the Republicans. First, I would say take a look at this. You had suburbs in New Jersey. I'm going to give you sort of a classic suburban county. This is Somerset County, and this is Jack Ciattarelli, the Republicans' home county here. So you're talking about a lot of white-collar professionals, bedroom communities, and we've talked nationally about how these voters tend not to be too fond of Donald Trump. So you see Ciattarelli in his home county got clobbered by 18 points here, and that's actually a little bit worse than Trump did last year. But I want to wind this back to 2021 because remember, Jack Ciattarelli ran 4 years ago and nearly won in New Jersey. And back then, it was a very close race in this county. There are a lot of voters in this county and in places like it, anti-Trump suburbanites. They were okay with Ciattarelli in 2021 when Trump was an ex-president. Now that Trump's back in the White House, they do not want to vote for Republicans. They want to send a message to Donald Trump. So that happened in suburbs across New Jersey. And the other thing that went wrong for Republicans and right for Democrats, this is one of the big national questions that came out of the 2024 election. Trump's gains with non-white voters. Could they attach to another candidate? Here's the place we looked last night, Hudson County. A lot of heavily, like 80% Hispanic cities here. Trump made massive gains in this county. Mamdani. Last year, a 50-point margin for Mikey Sherrill. That's kind of getting back to what the standard Democratic margin in this place has been. Again, last year, it was Democratic, but it was only 28 points. So again, Sherrill almost doubling the Democratic margin in heavily Hispanic Hudson County. So again, Republicans, Chitterelli, they were hoping that they could also make inroads with non-white voters. No evidence really of it in New Jersey. And then in New York City, we'll just call that one up. Get that up on the screen right here. And there it is. Okay, that was always the tricky one. And you can see Mamdani, I think, look, still some more votes to be counted here, just over 50%. Look, it is a solid win for Mamdani. I do think one thing I'd say is this ended up being the closest race of the night, by the way. I don't think we were expecting that necessarily from the polling. What happened was there ended up being more consolidation of the anti-Mamdani vote behind Cuomo. A lot of folks who had been saying in polls they might vote for Curtis Sliwa ended up moving into the Cuomo camp, probably making a decision that he was the only viable way to potentially beat Mamdani, because Sliwa had been polling at 15, 20%. He ends up with only 7%. And it is pretty clear that support went to Cuomo to make it. There were a few minutes there where it was a little interesting in New York City trying to figure it out. But again, that's a pretty solid margin for Mamdani overall.
Steve, I think one of the interesting things was while some of these big winners like Mamdani in New York, Spamberger, Virginia, Sherrill in New Jersey, while they went about the messaging differently, they were really focused on affordability and the economy. Does that come out as the top concern for voters?
Yeah, we saw that. We saw cost of living in New York City. We saw economy in Virginia. We saw it in New Jersey as well. And we saw the Democrats in those two gubernatorial elections winning on those issues. The one thing I would note on Mamdani, I would call it up. I don't think it's here right now. But so cost of living registered as the top issue in New York City. We also asked in the poll about each candidate's plans, their policies. We asked if Mamdani's are realistic. And a majority of New York City voters, 56% in the exit poll, said his plans are not realistic. That number much higher than number 4, Cuomo. So even as voters in New York City cited cost of living as their top issue, even as you do see Mamdani just over 50% here, an outright majority of voters in New York City don't think what he's saying is realistic.
Did you see how he just said numbers he doesn't even have? Do you have the exit polls memorized, Steve?
Yeah, some of them.
You're the best.
I guess New Yorkers have high aspirations. We'll see if those aspirations become a reality. Appreciate it, Steve.
Thank you so much. Well, now let's bring in NBC News senior national politics reporter Jonathan Allen. John, good morning. Great to see you. So we just talked with Steve there, of course, about so many sort of the unpacking of the Democratic win here. So now we're wondering how much of that can be seen as sort of a verdict on the Trump administration. What are your big takeaways in that regard?
Well, a lot of it can, certainly for those states, for New Jersey and Virginia in particular, which, of course, as Steve noted, are Democratic-leaning states. In 2024, Donald Trump won both of those states by 6 points. But the reason that you can look at it as a referendum on Trump and a message to Trump, if nothing else, is those huge margins that you saw. It went from 6 points in Virginia to 15 points for the Democratic candidate. Went from 6 points in New Jersey to 13 points for the Democratic candidate. If you went down ballot in Virginia, you saw an attorney general's race where the Democratic candidate won by that 6-point spread, even though he'd been criticized for text messages musing about the death of a rival and the death of the rival's children. I mean, this is that was sort of an exceptional outcome. I think most folks thought that there was a chance that candidate was going to lose. And, if he won, it would be by a whisker. But you're looking at, again, a 5 or 6 point spread. So and the Republicans that I spoke to last night said that this is a real message to Trump on the economy. And they hope he heeds it. At the same time, I'm old enough to remember Joe Biden early on in his presidency being sent messages about how voters were frustrated by the economy and effectively ignoring them, talking about inflation being transitory and denying that inflation was happening at one point. So it'll be interesting to see whether the president changes any of his policies or adjusts his message at all.
What does this election tell us about the state of the Democratic Party? Because you've got Mamdani, who's a Democratic socialist and just got a ton of enthusiasm behind him. But at the same time, you've got the winners in Virginia and New Jersey who are far more moderate Democrats.
Well, I think a couple of things. Number one, the thing that unifies Democrats or people who vote for Democrats remains antipathy for Donald Trump and frustration with Donald Trump. That said, and I think you guys pointed this out just a moment ago, there is a commonality, and Democratic strategists are pointing to this, that whether you are the super progressive Democratic socialist Mamdani in New York, or you are the more centrist Sherrill and Spanberger in New Jersey and Virginia, you were talking about affordability in this election, talking about the economy, focusing on that. One big difference, as pointed out to me by Faz Shakir, who was the campaign manager for Bernie Sanders in 2020, and somebody who's supportive of Mamdani, is that Mamdani has all those very specific policies that Steve was just talking about that many New York voters see as implausible or impractical, whereas Spanberger and Sherrill really focused more on the negative on Trump and did a little bit less detail on what exactly they would do with power. So Democrats still have a lot to do to figure out where they're going to go. But if you ask about the state of the Democratic Party, I think most Democrats would say they hope the rest of the states look a lot like Virginia and New Jersey come midterms.
John, let's talk about California and Prop 50 passing. Walk us through what that means for the balance of power in Congress and what it could mean as we see this redistricting fight unfold.
It's important to remember that candidates matter, and the moment at which elections matter, or the moment at which they're held matters. So sometimes we look at these maps and we say, okay, well, somebody picked up 5 seats here or 6 seats here because of the redistricting. These races still have to be run. But what it does mean, likely means, is that Democrats will be able to counter some of the redistricting moves that the Republicans have made, particularly in Texas. Republicans are hoping to net 5 seats there from their redistricting. Democrats hoping to get 5 seats out of California. And what it does is it more evens the playing field. The other thing that it does is it sets up Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, if he chooses to run for president in 2028. And I think most folks think that's a question of when he announces that rather than if he announces it. If he does, in fact, run, he will be able to point to this as a tangible result of his work. And I think that will not only give him some credibility with Democrats as someone who will fight for them, but also it will give him some latitude in terms of his own platform, having those pelts on the wall, so to speak.
All right, John Allen, thank you so much.
In Washington, as lawmakers pore over today's results, a new milestone has been reached in the ongoing government shutdown. At 36 days, it is now officially the longest one on record. And that's prompting a new warning from the Transportation Secretary about major air travel disruption if the stalemate continues. NBC News senior White House correspondent Garrett Hake has the latest. Garrett, good morning.
Joe, believe it or not, there's actually been a growing sense of optimism over on Capitol Hill that with the election now behind us and open enrollment now underway, that this shutdown focused on a political fight over health care could soon be coming to an end. But this morning, it's not at all clear what that ending will be. And now the Secretary of Transportation is adding this ominous new warning about the cost if the shutdown continues.
It's a record no one wanted to break. Now, 36 days in, the shutdown standoff is officially the longest in history. As the partisan gridlock continues in Washington, long lines and delays piling up at airports across the country, prompting this dire warning from the Transportation Secretary if the stalemate lasts into next week.
You will see mass flight delays. You'll see mass cancellations, and you may see us close certain parts of the airspace because we just cannot manage it because we don't have the air traffic controllers.
Secretary Duffy says staffing shortages in control towers accounted for nearly half of the flight delays Monday, as air traffic controllers and TSA workers continued to work without a paycheck. There's also new uncertainty this morning for millions of Americans who rely on federal food assistance, with long lines also growing at food banks nationwide.
Yeah, I was making it off my stamps.
But they're not available anymore.
No.
It comes after President Trump posted Tuesday that SNAP benefits, quote, will be given only when the radical left Democrats open the government and not before.
They really are using hunger as a political weapon.
Still, the White House says it's complying with a federal court order to use emergency funds to keep the program up and running, suggesting the president was referring to future payments.
We're complying with the court's order, and we're getting that partial payment out the door as much as we can and as quickly as we can, but it's going to take some time.
While in Congress, Democrats holding out for concessions from Republicans on health care, saying premiums for those on Obamacare are expected to skyrocket. Both sides pointing fingers.
I'm hopeful again that this is the week in which the Democrats will conclude that this is not a good thing.
So far, they have come to the table to negotiate exactly zero time.
And this morning, President Trump is hosting Republican senators here at the White House, where he's expected to encourage them to hold the line on the shutdown and also to press his case that the Senate should change its rules to allow Republicans to fund the government or pass anything else with just 50 votes, shutting Democrats out of the process entirely. Republicans had strongly opposed such a rule change when it was Democrats debating it during the Biden administration, and for now, it seems it will still take 60 votes and compromise to end this standoff. Joe?
All right, Garrett, thank you.
Well, this morning, federal investigators are trying to determine the cause of a catastrophic plane crash in Kentucky. It left at least 7 people dead. A warning, the video we're going to show you is upsetting. Authorities say a UPS cargo plane headed to Honolulu slammed into the ground shortly after takeoff. This happened at the main airport in Louisville yesterday. For more, let's bring in NBC News correspondent Adrienne Brada. She's in Louisville with the latest. Adrienne, last night, the mayor there said that officials thought they had everyone accounted for. But this morning, the governor is now saying that the death toll is expected to rise. Explain that to us. What do we know about that part of the investigation?
Hey, good morning to you guys. That is the tough part. As we know, at least 7 people were killed in this crash yesterday. 3 of them were on the flight. 4 others were on the ground. We heard from Governor Beshear once again this morning, letting us know there's going to be a news conference later this morning. But he said at least 16 different families showed up at the reunification center here saying their loved ones are still missing. So that's why he says that's a number that could increase. He did say there was a significant search and rescue mission overnight, and that search and rescue still continues today.
So, Adrienne, I mean, this crash triggered a number of explosions that impacted businesses nearby. We know people were told to shelter in place. Talk about how large the site that emergency responders and investigators are dealing with is and just what the situation is there on the ground.
Yeah, Joe, that is something investigators are going to look at. Look, we heard from witnesses who told our affiliate that they could see that huge plume of smoke miles away. If you go back and look at the initial shelter in place, it was a 5-mile radius. I can tell you that radius has been reduced. It's less than a mile this morning, if even that. We got alerts throughout the night saying that radius had been reduced. Meanwhile, there was some concern from folks on the ground about environmental concerns after seeing that huge plume of smoke, but we did hear from Governor Beshear, who said to his knowledge this plane was not carrying anything that would impact the environment. Still, there is air monitoring. The air quality alerts are being pushed out, and there's air monitoring going on the ground. You're taking a look at the video there. That terrifying moment was captured on video, but this video really just helps tell the story of what happened here as investigators will begin their leg of the investigation today. We know a team with NTSB is expected to be on the ground later this morning. And keep in mind, guys, because the government is shut down, that team will not get paid as it starts what will be, quite frankly, a lengthy investigation.
Adrienne, UPS Air Operations, it's actually headquartered there in Louisville, so there's this massive cargo operation, and we know this was this cargo flight headed to Honolulu. What are we hearing about the moments before the crash and what the plane was carrying?
Yeah, you know, our aviation expert is Tom Costello, and he says one thing that investigators are going to have to look at is whether or not there were any warnings. One key thing investigators will likely look at is what we can see from the video, that fire on engine 1, the left side of the engine. As far as we know, and we will likely ask these questions later in the day, we don't know that this was a special run. We do know that this plane was departing the airport here in Kentucky on its way to Honolulu, likely a regular cargo run. No indication that they were carrying anything special. But I can tell you right now, the airport has opened one runway, and inside, the boards that were once clear now have arrival times and departure times.
All right, Adrian, thank you very much.
For more analysis of the crash, let's bring in NBC News aviation analyst Jeff Gazzetti. He's a former FAA and NTSB investigator. Jeff, good to have you with us. Just first things first, when you look at that video we've seen that's available of the crash, does anything jump out at you?
Good morning, Joe. Well, certainly there is something going on with that left wing, with that left engine. And apparently there was some debris from the left engine, the cowling that was left on the side of the runway. And you see a little trail of smoke there. So something began to go wrong, and then it turned into a fireball on that left wing, which holds fuel. The wings hold the fuel. And for some reason, the airplane just could not continue to climb.
Jeff, the scale of the site that investigators are coming through, it's a city-wide, block-long area. Where do investigators even begin?
This is routine for the NTSB GO team. So they're going to go in there. They're going to hard target the flight recorders, right? They're going to try to find the tail where the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder are. They're also going to go to the UPS maintenance area and begin looking at maintenance records. With regard to the actual physical wreckage, that massive ground scar, they're just going to have to take their time and walk through that wreckage and document it and then allow it to be cleaned up. So the protocols will be initiated by the NTSB. Again, they're used to these kinds of large-scale investigations, and they should be able to document everything in less than a week.
Jeff, as we mentioned, Muhammad Ali International Airport, it's a major UPS hub. It's also in this industrial area with a petroleum recycling facility nearby. Does that present any extra challenges?
Well, so because of the fuel in the airplane's wings and the fuel on the ground in this recycling center, it created a lot of flame, a lot of thermal damage that may destroy a lot of the evidence. The actual smoke isn't really that toxic. In other words, they put the fires out. We've confirmed there were no hazardous materials on board the airplane. And the other petroleum aspects, I don't think poses a significant risk to the people in that area. But it's going to pose a challenge to investigators to kind of pick through the charred, burnt ruins and determine what was destroyed and what can be looked at.
All right, Jeff Guzzetti, thank you very much. Your expertise is appreciated this morning.
The Pacific Northwest continues to experience strong rain and winds. We have more details now with your Morning News Now weather.
Angie Lastman's back with us. Hey, Angie, good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning. It is quite a busy one across parts of the Pacific Northwest here as we gear up for the day today. You can see we've got this really strong, powerful Pacific storm that's working on shore here over the next day or so. And you can see just that atmospheric river that has developed. Now, what that means is we've got a really narrow band of intense moisture that's basically just being delivered straight to the coast. This is moisture coming from the tropics, so it's quite ample, and we're going to continue to see the potential for some heavy rain, some gusty winds working across this region here over the next couple of days. But just like other weather events, we've got a level of intensity that we're looking at with atmospheric rivers as well. And this one, anywhere from San Francisco all the way up through the Pacific Northwest, we're talking about at least extreme conditions, a couple of spots looking exceptional. So gearing up for a whole lot of moisture associated with this system, of course, and we're also watching another clipper system across parts of the Midwest and the Great Lakes working into the Northeast through the day today. Both of these areas are going to remain windy, so no surprise that we've got a whole lot of wind alerts out across parts of the West Coast, 11 million people. For the Northeast, it's 46 million people, including Boston, New York, and Cleveland. Those wind gusts are going to be ramped up here as the day goes on, but this clipper system bringing some morning rain to folks across the Great Lakes, and we'll notice some of this rain working across this region here as we get into this afternoon. So places like New York, parts of New England, going to see that wet kind of weather settle in, and the potential for a couple of stronger storms will be there too. By tomorrow, just as fast as it came in, that system moves out, but we're left over with some of this higher elevation snow and unfortunately those really strong and even chilly winds. Big picture look for your temperatures. We're looking at near record heat for some folks, so a bit of a different story than the snow we're going to see in some locations. We've got 60s for Detroit, 70s for St. Louis and Tulsa, 80s and high 80s at that across parts of Texas. More of that warmth staying with us across the middle of the country. That's essentially going to dominate the forecast there. 80s for Lubbock, 69 degrees for Kansas City. Some of these spots running more than 10, 15 degrees above normal. A cooler weekend is in sight, though. You can see even places like Wichita and St. Louis, you'll get down to those low 70s. We've got the mid-60s on Friday in Chicago, but check out your Sunday forecast. Back to the 40s we go. Minneapolis, if you're looking for some chilly weather, you got it on Sunday. 34 degrees. That's all you're going to get for your high. Well, we will start the weekend, of course, in some of these locations with more mild temperatures, upper 40s, mid-60s, depending on where you are, but feeling very fall-like.
You get to experience each season over the course of a few days.
That is what they say about the Midwest, right? Like, if you wait long enough, you'll get every season in one day.
72 to 46 is quite the drop.
Rude awakening.
All right, that sounds like a head cold to me. Thanks, Andrew. Much more to come on this hour of Morning News Now, including our continuing coverage of Decision 2025 and the massive night for Democrats across America.
First, after the break, the Supreme Court showdown coming later today with President Trump's sweeping tariff plan on the docket. We're going to dig into how we got here and what could come next after the High Court hands down a ruling. That's next. Back now with a major legal test for President Trump's sweeping tariffs on international imports. This morning, the Supreme Court will hear oral arguments on whether the president had the authority to use a law designated for times of emergency to issue the tariffs. But the case could also put the court's conservative majority on the hot seat, both politically and legally. Just the latest legal test of how far the president's power extends. We're joined now by NBC News legal analyst Misty Maris for more on this. Good to have you with us. So we know when President Trump imposed these tariffs this year, he pointed to this law from 1977. What can you tell us about that statute and what the case is going to be focused on?
Yeah, so this is the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, and it gives the president authority to regulate international commerce in times when there is a declared national emergency. So that's the law that we're dealing with. And the question is whether or not the president unilaterally can invoke, using these emergency powers, these types of global tariffs, which have no end in sight, there's no time frame for them, rather than Congress needing to approve. Because under Article 1 of the Constitution, Congress would generally oversee and need to rubber stamp tariffs. And so it's really a balance between executive authority and legislative authority.
This first Trump administration has kept the Supreme Court very busy, a lot of decisions. But is there anything different about this case?
Well, so it's really important to understand this is not about are tariffs legal. It's about whether or not the way that these have been imposed was constitutional. So this case is of great economic consequence, and it's also of great consequence when it comes to the use of these emergency powers in financial and foreign commerce issues. So this is going to be a case that everyone will watch, also because we're really looking at some of the other conservative judges and what way they will go on this, because what's central in this case is something called the major questions doctrine. And it said when you have questions of major political or economic consequence, Congress has the opportunity to say, well, there's executive authority there, the president can decide. And this particular statute does not mention tariffs specifically. So it's all about interpreting whether or not that word regulate encompasses these types of sweeping tariffs.
So we know we're very early in this Supreme Court term, which means they have many months to issue a decision if they want to wait that long. Do you expect, though, they're going to try and move quickly on this one?
Yeah, so this is an expedited oral argument, which would indicate that this is of great consequence and that a decision needs to be made faster. So usually we would expect it before June of next year, but we could see a decision in weeks as opposed to months.
We'll see what happens. Misty Maris, thank you so much. Appreciate it. To the Middle East now, where Hamas says it has returned the remains of the last American hostage to Israel. NBC News international correspondent Claudio Lavaga joins us now with our world news in 60 seconds. Claudio, good morning.
Good morning, that's right. Itay Chen was only 19 when he was killed while his Israeli military unit was trying to defend a kibbutz back in Israel on October the 7th, 2023. Now he's the 21st deceased hostage to be returned by Hamas and the last with an American citizenship. Now only 7 deceased hostages remain to be returned from Gaza. Let's go now to the Philippines, where the death toll from a powerful typhoon climbed to 66. The most affected area is the province of Cebu, a major tourist hub where residents are now confronted with the devastation left behind by the typhoon, including destroyed homes, overturned vehicles, and widespread debris. Among the fatalities were 6 military personnel whose helicopter crashed during a humanitarian mission. And let's end this tour of the world in Bangkok, where several Miss Universe contestants clashed with the president of the international beauty competition, Miss Grand International, after he reprimanded Miss Mexico in front of all the contestants. A video posted on social media on Tuesday shows the Thai businessman criticize heavily Miss Mexico's absence from a sponsorship shoot. Then he's seen raising his voice as she walks out of the room, and then he warns the other contestants to sit down if they want to continue the competition. Well, as you may guess, if you treat like that Miss Universe or any other woman, then you'll be criticized universally. Back to you.
All right, Claudio, thank you so much. Coming up, he was one of the most polarizing figures in U.S. politics.
After the break, we're diving into the divisive life and the lasting legacy of former Vice President Dick Cheney, who passed away earlier this week at the age of 84. That's next on Morning News Now.
Back now with more on a resounding night for Democrats as voters cast the first ballots of a second Trump presidency. Here in New York, the city elected its youngest mayor in a century. NBC News is projecting 34-year-old Zohran Mamdani has come out on top in the race for City Hall. He defeated former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo in last night's election. It's also a big night for Democrats in New Jersey. Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill is projected to become the state's next governor after defeating Republican Jack Ciattarelli. He also lost the general election to current Governor Phil Murphy back in 2021.
History was made in Virginia as voters in the Commonwealth elected their first woman governor. NBC News projects Abigail Spanberger has defeated Republican rival Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earl Sears. And in California, voters have overwhelmingly approved a Democratic-drawn new congressional map. This comes months after Texas redrew its state map to favor Republicans. We'll have more reaction and analysis of all the results throughout the day here on NBC News Now. Well, also this morning, we are looking at the legacy of one of the most powerful and divisive figures in U.S. politics. Dick Cheney, the former Republican vice president, died Monday night of complications from pneumonia and cardiovascular disease. He was 84 years old.
Cheney was one of the key architects of what was known as the War on Terror in the aftermath of 9/11. He famously pushed for the invasion of Iraq in 2003, claiming the country had weapons of mass destruction and that it had ties to al-Qaeda. Both claims turned out to be false.
Joining us now to talk more about Cheney is presidential historian Alexis Coe. Alexis, good morning. Thanks for being with us. So the Vice President Cheney, he faced major public backlash when it turned out that the invasion of Iraq was based on false intelligence, as Joe had just mentioned. This was a war that was widely viewed as destabilizing to the Middle East and creating this power vacuum in Iraq that ultimately led to the rise of ISIS. How much of a defining moment do you think that was for Cheney's political career?
I think it's all we've been talking about. And so I would say it's the defining moment of his career. And he had a long one on the Hill. He was never known as, whatever as a peacemaker. He was no Jimmy Carter. He was always a war hawk, but he was never in such a position of power to enact it. And he remains the only person of significance from that administration, meaning one of the senior officials, whether it's the president himself, George W. Bush, Condoleezza Rice, Colin Powell, who has never said that it was a mistake. He stood by his stance until his last breath.
You've written an article for Rolling Stone titled, quote, Cheney worried about Trump abusing power. He had himself to blame. In it, you talk about how Vice President Cheney's push to expand presidential powers is now being taken advantage of by President Trump. Tell us more about your argument here.
Absolutely. I mean, Cheney was the architect. George W. Bush signed all the papers, but Cheney saw this vision of executive power that was almost unlimited and had next to no oversight. It was very much this move fast and break things, but there was a war that we were looking at. And now we see it through DOGE, we see it through government shutdown, through SNAP benefits being withheld. We see it through the ACA being really close to its deadline. And so we see this sort of unitary executive theory, as we call it in academia, but we see that really starting to take hold with Cheney, because after Watergate, there were all these different limits that were put in for good reason, and Congress approved of them. And then suddenly, we get from Cheney, we see this expansion, and then Trump really carries it home. But I should say that Obama as well and other presidents have certainly extended a lot of interrogation tactics, for example. And so I wouldn't say that this is distinct to the Republican Party, but I will say that there has been nothing like it since Cheney, and there will be nothing like it after Trump, hopefully. We'll see.
Interesting, as we saw him break off from the Republican Party in the later stages of his life, almost like ironically voting for a Democrat, for Kamala Harris, in the last election, presidential election of his life. Where do you think he stands among the prominent Republican politicians of our time?
Well, it's a fascinating character study and a study within the party that usually expects everyone to stand in line. And even though most in his party had come to the dim view that the war in Iraq was a bad idea, Cheney never did. He, however, remained really influential. His issue with Trump at first was just, of course, that he thought he was somewhat uncouth. And then, of course, it was the insurrection that changed his mind. But it was only the insurrection and his treatment of his daughters. We have to remember, we're also remembering who he was as a person, not just a political figure. Cheney was a really devoted father. And when Trump went after his daughter, Liz Cheney, that was personal to him. And he made it personal, and he took this stance. And it's interesting because we've said, I've said in this interview that Cheney remained the only person who hadn't said, well, the intelligence was faulty. Perhaps we shouldn't have invaded Iraq. This was a bad idea. And at the same time, he's also, George W. Bush did not come out verbally and really, speak against Trump's second term. He did things like he didn't shake Trump's hand at a funeral. But Cheney was very vocal, and he said, I'm voting for a Democrat. And so his legacy is complicated, like people's.
Alexis, thank you so much. We appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you.
Well, coming up, are America's new homes becoming a little too smart for some prospective buyers?
So we come back, why more and more people are looking to ditch all those fancy and often expensive household smart devices in favor of something a little more dumb. We'll explain next.
Now to the latest trend that is reminding us all of a simpler time. The popularity of those Wi-Fi enabled blinds and light bulbs, all that stuff in your house, might be dimming as reports suggest people are looking for ways to make their smart homes dumb again, for lack of a better way to put it. NBC News correspondent Morgan Chesky is in Los Angeles with more on why so many people are kicking smart devices to the curb. Hey, Morgan, good morning.
Hey, Savannah, good morning. This one hitting close to home here, because if you've ever found yourself getting frustrated when those smart home devices that are supposed to make our lives easier crash, you are definitely not alone. And now a new home trend report from real estate giant Zillow suggests that being smarter isn't always better.
From doorbells to lights, and yes, even toasters.
The best thing since sliced bread? Now toast it.
Our homes have supposedly become smarter than ever.
Alexa, start my day.
But it's when those devices decide not to work or are simply overly complicated that many find high tech leaves them high and dry.
Alexa, stop!
Now, a new trend report from Zillow suggests dwellings are undergoing a digital detox in favor of dumb homes.
I don't want a smart house.
The company says listings mentioning more intimate spaces like reading nooks are appearing 48% more often, which the company says reflects the growing demand for unplugged relaxation at home.
People are apt out.
Realtors like Julie Provenzano in Dallas are taking note.
So in some cases, a home can almost become too smart.
A home can become too smart, and sometimes we just got to reel it in. We don't want to be arguing with our technology.
One survey found 1 in 3 Americans grow frustrated with their smart home devices at least once a week, with most people expressing concern over the technology's expense, security, and reliability. Yep, even George Jetson wasn't a fan of his space-age smart bed.
I hate that thing!
In Helena, Montana, Patria Lincoln Minnie and her family moved to this more classic casa after the smart devices in her old home finally hit a boiling point.
Setting up the sprinkler system through an app, that would bring us to tears. Literally, it was so frustrating.
All of our light switches are very simple. We have buttons.
Now with some nostalgic simplicity, she says there's no place like her dumb home.
And the true joy of it is that you just stop noticing it. It's high praise to have a dumb home.
High praise indeed. And guys, despite this trend, research does show that smart home tech can increase property value when done right. But real estate experts warn that if you do plan on installing any of those smart devices, try and stick with trusted brands that'll be around for years to come, and ask yourself, will this still be relevant in 3 to 5 years? Otherwise, you could be on the hook for yet another pricey upgrade. Savannah?
Those are good tips. All right, Morgan, thank you.
The White House may soon strike a deal to lower the cost of those popular weight loss drugs.
NBC's Emily Lorsch is back with us this hour with that and other money headlines. Hey, Emily, good morning.
Hey, guys, good morning. If this deal is made with Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk, it could cut the cost of GLP-1 medication Zepbound and Wegovy to about $150 a month. That would be in exchange for limited Medicare coverage. An announcement could come as soon as this week with details on who would qualify and what the terms would be. And Cava's feeling the pinch from younger diners. The Mediterranean chain cut its full-year forecast again after seeing fewer visits from 25 to 34-year-olds, a group hit harder by unemployment and student loan repayments. It's an issue also weighing on rival fast casual chain Chipotle. Still, Cava's gaining market share and expanding, now at more than 400 locations. And with cuffing season underway, a new study from the digital platform Pop Menu is revealing what could cost someone that second date. The data shows that the average amount consumers believe should be spent on a first date at a restaurant is $120. Half of people say they'll typically order something less expensive if someone else is paying, with 11% saying they'll order something more expensive. And as for who should foot the bill, well, more than 40% of people say it's whoever asks the other person out, with another 35% of consumers having a more traditional viewpoint, saying that if a man and a woman are out on a date together, the man should be the one that is paying. Savannah and
That's
Joe.
always a discussion.
With apps, how do you figure out who did what first? Is it?
Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah.
And it's very controversial. I've heard both sides arguments.
I think you just got to know what bugs you and what doesn't.
Yeah.
If he's not going to pay, don't go on another date.
That's fair. That's fair.
All right. Thanks, Emily.
All right, now to a surprise comeback for former NFL superstar Tom Brady. No, we're not talking about him coming out of retirement again.
The football legend says that his beloved family dog is actually a clone, a complete genetic replica of his previous pet who passed away 2 years ago. NBC News correspondent Emily Ikeda has more on the technology that made it happen.
Hey there, well, it's no secret we all adore our furry friends, but if given the opportunity, would you clone your pet? Tom Brady is the latest celebrity to say yes to the advancing tech, reinvigorating the debate over copy and pasting, man's best friend.
Tom Brady's adorable pup, Junie, is a social media star. But if she looks familiar, it's definitely not a coincidence. The dog is actually a clone of Brady's previous pit bull mix, Lua, who died in 2023. The NFL legend revealing his new dog's background this week, writing, "In a few short months, Colossal gave my family a second chance with a clone of our beloved dog. Brady, an investor in the biotech company Colossal Biosciences. The company's CEO compares the process of cloning to IVF without sperm.
When you clone a dog, is it just the appearance? Is there also an element of personality? What can you expect?
When you clone an animal, it's an identical genetic copy. So it's the physical traits, it's its appearance, but a lot of the behavioral traits as well come with that. There's still environmental factors that affect all of us.
Colossal just announced the acquisition of Viagen, which had been cloning dogs and cats for a decade, including the pets of other celebrities like Barbra Streisand and Paris Hilton.
Wait, what? This is Diamond and Baby. Diamond's clones.
But the cutting-edge tech is controversial. According to one poll, the nearly 60% of Americans who find it morally wrong to clone animals significantly outnumber those who find it morally acceptable. You may remember Colossal is the company behind de-extinction efforts focused on bringing back the woolly mammoth, dodo bird, and Tasmanian tiger. Earlier this year, the company announced it genetically engineered a trio of wolves resembling the long-extinct dire wolf, made famous in Game of Thrones.
There are no dire wolves south of the wall. Now there are 5.
Ben Lamb acknowledges new technology can be scary, but says their priority is using it to maintain biodiversity.
Cloning is a critical step in saving species and reversing this terrible extinction trend that's happening.
So if you're hoping to copy and paste your perfect pooch, be prepared to pay up. We're talking about $50,000 for a dog or cat. And if you want to clone a horse, it's $85,000. Back to you.
Holy moly. All right, Emily, thank you so much. Certainly a talker. Now we want to turn back to one more time our top story, the Democrat sweep of major races in yesterday's election. Moments ago, President Trump made some comments on last night's election results at a breakfast he hosted for Republican senators.
Here's some of what he had to say about what was behind Republicans' big losses.
I think if you read the pollsters, the shutdown was a big factor, negative for the Republicans. And that was a big factor. And they say that I wasn't on the ballot was the biggest factor. But I don't know about that, but I was honored that they said that.
More coverage and reaction to come throughout the day. All right, coming up here, the Swiftie who is in his research era, swapping the concert venue for the classroom.
When Morning News Now returns, we'll introduce you to the Texas professor who's using a bit of logic to figure out why her biggest hits, well, hit different. That's up next. Stay with us. Are you ready for it? We're going to end this hour with one Texas professor who used data analysis to uncover what he calls the invisible string that makes Taylor Swift's music hit different, revealing that once again, Swift proves to be quite the mastermind. Reporter Tahira Rahman from our affiliate in Dallas explains.
Been a Taylor Swift fan since 2009.
It started in his grad student era.
And my fandom just grew and grew from there.
Now, Andrew Ledbetter is a Swiftie dad who knows the music all too well.
So I was interested in the interconnections among the song lyrics.
The chair of communication studies at TCU wanted to test an academic theory.
That the songs that are most central, that have a lot of overlap with other songs, might tend to be the songs that are the most popular.
So he took all 10 of Taylor Swift's albums out at the time and ran the lyrics through a computer.
Yeah, at what threshold do we say, okay, these two songs are connected?
That number, are you ready for it? 13.
That if two Taylor Swift songs share at least 13 words in common, then those two songs, mathematically, it made sense to treat those as connected.
Swift's self-proclaimed lucky number.
Okay, she really is the mastermind. I'm sure there's no way she could plan to that level of detail. And there was a mathematical rationale for that cutoff, but I just really like that cutoff as a Swiftie.
Long story short, the theory proved true.
You can look at the list and say, okay, generally, there are exceptions, but generally the songs that are most central do tend to be songs that either are big hits or they're perhaps fan favorites.
That was measured by Spotify streams, critic evaluation, and social media mentions.
All Too Well is a very central song.
It's all research in the Communication Quarterly Journal. And just so there's no blank space, Ledbetter added Swift's last two albums too, published on his blog.
So would you say that from an academic perspective, there's something to learn from Taylor Swift's music writing?
Definitely, yeah. So I think it helps understand Taylor Swift, but I think it also helps us understand overall, how do we engage with stories in art, and what stories do we find most interesting and compelling?
It could lead to Ledbetter's next era.
I would love to teach a seminar on Taylor Swift.
That's the life of a researcher and a fearless Swiftie.
Sign me up for that.
There you go.
Thanks to Tahira Rahman from our NBC Dallas for that report.
Math. All right, that's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
Stay with us, though. The news continues right now.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.